Okay, good afternoon, and like others in the previous 2 days, we want to, as a panel, thank General Sullivan for his leadership, as well as AUSA for this opportunity to bring together both our great Army as well as industry in a frank and open exchange. So today, our panel builds on not only what General Cohn has presented as Force 2025, but actually goes back to yesterday. And if you recall, General Walker basically talked about the Army of 2025, and then we had a session, a panel that talked about what potential requirements could come from that. And now General Cohn's just laid out the force. And so the title of this panel today is Technology to Enable the Strategic Land Power in 2025. I know in industry you're deeply interested in what might be the requirement on the technical side and what could potentially help the Army solve its requirements as it goes forward. General Hicks, General Cohn mentioned General Hicks several times during his presentation, and he's obviously well qualified to lead this as the Deputy Director of our KIC. Also on our panel, you'll see it's very diverse. On the government and S&T side, we have Dr. Grace Bochenek. She's the Chief Technology Officer from Army Materiel Command. General Mark Curran, retired Lieutenant General, Vice President of Army Programs and Huntsville Operations from L3 Communications. Major General retired Steve Layfield, he's a member of the Spectrum Group as well as the new President of Government Industrial Division of X2 Biosystems is also with us. Mr. Bob Dunn, to the right, is the CEO of PacStar. And then finally, last but not least, is Dr. Maren Leed. She's a senior advisor from the Center of Strategic and International Security, CSIS, and also been an advisor to many Army senior leaders. And with that, I'll turn it on over to General Hicks.
Thanks, sir. Can I have the next slide, please? Next slide. One more. Okay, great, thanks. First, I'd like to thank General Cohn for kind of teeing this up for us, and thanks to our panel members, some of whom have come from a long way to be here to broaden this panel out, and I think provide, as General Schloesser noted, a very diverse set of views which are important. I want to start from a slightly different place. CG mentioned the Chief several times, and so I want to start out with his strategic and priorities, which he promulgated last fall. And in the highlights kind of hit the key considerations that I think frame many of the things that General Cohn touched on and that I'll speak about. And I just want to highlight a couple in particular. So capability and capacity. We've all seen the newspaper articles. The Army will go below 490, but we have to protect not only our capabilities, and that includes improving them over time as we lean out, as General Cohn described, but also we've got to figure out a way to maintain the uniqueness of our Army, which is, of course, our capacity, our depth, endurance, the breadth of capabilities that we bring to the fight, which are unique not only to the U.S. Armed Forces, but frankly to armed forces worldwide. Expeditionary, the ability to rapidly deploy into austere environments and operate immediately upon arrival, building momentum from the beginning of a campaign, is critical. Range of military operations, we cannot afford to cede any of that space to our adversaries because that will become an asymmetric problem for us to have to solve at a later date. So we have to maintain a focus there. And then the Chief's emphasis on the emerging threats, which is really looking at what's next. We have to learn the lessons not only of the last decade of war, but of other conflicts, but more importantly, we have to make sure that we're looking forward so that we're well postured for the future. And then last 2 points, scalable and modern. This is important, and the Chief is emphasizing the criticality of modernizing the Army as we go forward, not only in near-term adaptation, but also in making those fundamental changes in innovation as we go forward. Next slide. Given the Chief's vision, and as General Cohn noted, we've undertaken a series of strategic and operational initiatives in response to contemporary and emerging challenges ranging from the fiscal pressures that we're all very familiar with and are on the headlines daily, as well as the increasingly CONUS basing of our Army. and also many of the challenges raised by General Walker and noted by General Cohn, the most dominant of which is this idea of the rising velocity of human interaction, the ability of groups to connect, organize, and act at speeds and on scales and in manners that we have not seen here to date. There are small inklings of this, you see in how the Arab Spring unfolded, the manner in which the Egyptians organized both to overthrow the first government and their second one in very rapid succession, and frankly how the jihadis are organizing themselves, recruiting globally, bringing those folks together from across the globe and training and employing them in Syria as we speak. We think that foreshadows a very different threat environment than what we're used to. And I would note that somebody who has some passing understanding of this connection business, Eric Schmidt, the CEO of Google, in his book, The New Digital Age, noted that we can expect more revolutions more frequently as we head into the future because of this phenomenon. This in part frames our strategic concept of strategic land power. As General Cohn noted, this is a collaborative effort between the Commandant of the Marine Corps, the Chief of Staff of the Army, and the Commander of U.S. SOCOM. They signed out a white paper last May. I think this may be one of the first times that the Commandant and Chief have actually signed a document that was not involved with the Joint Chiefs. So if nothing else, that's a seminal act in and of itself and shows you the common view that we have achieved in trying to institutionalize the hard-learned lessons of the last decade of war. As General Cohn noted, recenter our understanding of war, not only within the three services or forces that operate on land, but across the joint force and within the defense and national security infrastructure on the immutable human aspects of conflict, and then also recognizing the limits of combat overmatch in trying to achieve strategic outcomes, to seek to improve land power as a strategic asset that delivers on the national and allied objectives across the globe, both in peace and war. Those two components that General Cohn touched on, maneuvering strategically, you see below that, the Army is talking now about being regionally engaged, and that's the Army's complement to this higher order idea of maneuvering strategically, which is about building partners and capacity around the world, reassuring allies, and preventing and shaping. Expeditionary maneuver, this is the Chief talks relentlessly about being globally responsive, and that's how those two aspects fit. And then what was not on General Cohn's slide is you see this global land power network. So we've already kind of begun work with our partners to take the idea that SOCOM has put forward and look at it in terms of how we build communities, if you will, of increasingly interoperable forces around the world, land forces that will either have the capability to deal with problems locally without assistance, or with our assistance or those of our partners, as you see with France and Mali, or when necessary, where the U.S. will lead a coalition and we have greater support access more readily at hand with capable forces. And then the bottom kind of shows the progression of where we are today, where we're headed over the next decade, and then beyond into the era of beyond 2025, where we think some of the trends that General Walker touched on yesterday are going to converge in ways that will demand more fundamental change than the very important and in some cases significant, but probably more incremental change that you'll see over the next decade. Next slide. So recognizing the challenges that we face, we really have two pathways to go forward here. And this slide really focuses on the investments that we must make to secure the future. I would note that it's oriented mostly on our physical capabilities, but this is not just a focus merely on science and technology or materiel. We are looking very carefully at how we operate, how we organize, and how we man and equip the future force. You really can't change how you organize and operate if you don't change what you're made out of, and vice versa. So this is a symbiotic relationship, and for those who are familiar with, kind of the ideas of General Depew and General Starry, General Depew said technology drives concepts, and General Starry said concepts drive technology. And we've decided to split the difference because, frankly, at the end of the day, you have to understand the art of the possible to think about how you want to organize and operate differently. But having said that, in our initial appraisals, you see down at the bottom the small chart that has the brown, red, and green arrows. We believe that absent some changes in our own behavior across .mil-PF, in science and technology, in how we organize, in how we fight, we are at risk of seeing many of the operational advantages that we've come to accept and expect to be at risk of those no longer being our overmatch, but being our adversaries, or best case, being contested. When you add that to the point that in strength is going to go down, and it's not a linear function between the percent reduction in manpower and the percent reduction in combat power. As in strength goes down, our combat power will decrease at a more rapid rate than the percent. So if you go down 1%, you're talking somewhere in the nature of about 2% reduction in combat power in terms of what we're going to have to do with our Army. And so the challenges we face are really are four. We have to be more expeditionary because of the nature of the emerging operating environment and the fact that we're going to be increasingly based at home. We must maintain and improve our overmatch, and I'll come back to that in just a minute. And in fact, the areas that we have looked at are very consistent with the White House Science Advisor's briefing earlier today. We're going to have to make changes to our organization and operations concepts because we're going to have to figure out how to recover combat capability and capacity in the sharp end of the Army going forward. And that's going to require some different ways of thinking about the trades we make and what we invest in, even on in the combat force. And we must also posture the Army for the decade of 2030-40. But 2 points. One, I'll come back to overmatch. The first one is on this in strength versus combat power piece. As we shape the Army from 560 to 490 in the active force, and now we're going to head to about a little over 1 million across the three components of active National Guard and Reserve. We didn't really lose a lot of combat power. In fact, we almost lost no combat power. It's more about reorganization and shedding of mission command headquarters and that sort of thing. And so the punch of the Army at 490 is effectively the same as the punch at 560 at the height of the surge. The next cut we take, and I don't have a crystal ball, there's lots of numbers in the press. The chief talked about 450 being manageable. We've done analysis to say that that's probably manageable risk. But that's real reductions in combat power. That's no longer just reorganization. We're going to shed combat brigades very likely as we go through that. So that's one piece that we've got to figure out how to reverse that by the investments that we make and the changes over the next, hopefully, decade. So that's one problem. The other problem, if we could go to, I think it's the second or third backup, it's the overmatch slide. Or not?
Just tell them to go.
Okay. So,
well, all you need to do is go forward about 3 slides on the same deck. Yeah, one more. Keep going. There you go.
Great. Perfect. So just, I mentioned this because this is not something where we are proposing that there may be an overmatch risk. We actually entered into we've been at this for a while, we've entered into a long-term assessment with the Intel folks that support the acquisition in science and technology sectors of the Army, NGIC, and our own folks at TRADOC G2. And we looked at a variety of issues. These are representative, they're not, this is not the full list. And our assessment was startling, and the slide's been presented before, but we then gave it to a bunch of scientists and engineers outside of the military to look at. And they said, oh, no, you are way too optimistic about when you're going to show overmatch. So when you see active protection, rocket cannon, artillery, chemical weapons, et cetera, we felt that we still had an advantage in those areas today, and their reply back to us was not so fast. So this is not a necessarily, a done deal. but it is a cautionary tale that we're going to have to account for as we go forward, and will be one of the key factors, as General Cohn talked about, a leaner force that is of equal or greater capability. And so that equal or greater capability is going to be one of the key areas that we have to focus on as we go forward. And with that, sir, I'll conclude my remarks.
Thank you, General Hicks. Okay, on to Dr. Bochenek.
Okay. I'm going to, first of all, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for AUSA for inviting me to join this great panel of industry, and of course, my partner here from TRADOC. Very important topic for somebody who's made a career in the research and development field for the United States Army. And we indeed are in what I would call a critical inflection point. And interestingly enough, we're in a critical inflection point where we're in the positions we are, and it's up to us to navigate through this. So I would like to just highlight a few things, and then I'll make some points on some very, very specific things in terms of expeditionary. But first, I want to talk a little bit about, we've had a good day and a half and a lot of good conversation about what the world will look like in 2025. But I'm going to spin it a little and talk to you about what it means in terms of the technical expertise and the ability to develop those technologies. So the competition for technical expertise is going to be very, very critical and very, very fierce, because it's going to be needed by more and more players across the world. We're going to have a greater reliance on industry, and I don't mean the defense industry. I mean in some sectors, it might be the commercial industry that will be driving that. There's so many, and it was brought up many, many times about the social aspects of human interaction. And the fact of the matter is technology and advancements will truly be global and accessible to all, which includes our adversaries. So the defense enterprise, which includes us in government and industry, will increasingly be internationalized from both a supply and demand. So what does that tell me about the future? It means all the things that we heard today, we need to be able to innovate. We need to be able to shorten our development cycles so that we could stay in front of that changing threat. We have to do this, and we have to be able to deliver greater efficiencies and more combat power, at the same time trying to be much more efficient at the way that we do that. And so it's a shift. It's a shift from a linear approach to much more cost-informed, dynamic, integrated ability for us to transition this technology. Now, the good news is we're able to do this because of the people in this room and in our organizations, our commitment, our ingenuity, and the ability of our technical community to deliver. So I'm going to talk to you about 4 things that are really relevant to how we need to be able to get there. One is, again, about the people, a little bit about the business process, innovation, and then I will tie it up with expeditionary and what does that mean from a technical perspective. So the people is really important, and we talk a lot about what that warfighter might look like in 2025. So as the AMC Chief Technology Officer, I'm concerned, what is the workforce going to look like, the technical workforce that's going to be able to deliver in 2025 and beyond. We have to build them because we don't just grow them, it takes time. I look at my career, and I'm a good example of what the Army is able to do. Bring somebody in as an intern, take them and let them mature through their technical competency, allow them to go get master's program, degrees, and then follow on PhDs. And after that, you're 12 years into your career and you're ready to really, really deliver capability. So in the future, it's going to be about right competencies, and it's not just the right competencies within the government, but it's going to be those shared competencies with our defense industry partners. How do we see ourselves? Things that we're doing today within AMC and within RDCOM and of course with DAS-RT is really looking at our workforce. What is the skills of that workforce? And not just their degrees, what are they really able to do? Can we forecast? Are we able to shift their talents to those critical new capabilities? Again, a new landscape for us. We all talk about in-house competencies and our ability to deliver, And I'm telling you that there's a non-traditional role that also is emerging. If the commercial industry is going to be pacing some of these technologies, it also means that we, and when I say we, I mean we in the government and we as defense industry also have to be intelligent customers. We have to know how to monitor technology and assess that technology, and when we think it's relevant and it's economically viable, we need to be able to pull it forward, and we need to be able to pull it forward fast. So as the career program manager for the engineers and scientists across the Army, we're working to do some of those things in terms of developing those competencies and allowing us to shift. Process. Again, we all, if you've been in our business, and there's not one of us who's been in the technology business that hasn't come up and had someone talk to us about what we would call the valley of death. Are we going, you know what? It's not an option anymore, this valley of death. We have to break the code of how we're going to be able to transition technology. And so I'm going to tell you what I think that means in terms of how we have to adjust our business processes. And it's some very fundamental things, but I think that they go a long way. So we have to think about new partnerships and new business models with industry, between government labs, that allow us to bring these kind of competencies together in very non-traditional ways. We have to understand the supply chain for our systems and figure out how to drive innovation at the lowest level. And we have to figure out a way to bring small business innovation into our larger scale business models. We need stronger linkages between the TRADOC requirements generation community, the material developers within the labs and within the R&D centers across AMC and across the Army, with the Department of Army, the staff, Mary Miller and her organizations, in order to make this an effective way to do business. Again, it's about horizontal integration. It's about adding a little discipline, but not preventing innovation. Repeatable processes, the idea of portfolio management, and our ability to prioritize. I think we talk a lot about it, but our ability to prioritize not only within a single domain, but across domains is going to be critical. And I say, as you look at technology, we have to figure out how we account for what's inherently risk in technology, because there is risk. And we may have to start thinking of probability of success of those things, and how does that fit into our model? And then we surely can't be afraid to stop programs or stop technology efforts when they're not meeting the goals we'd like them to meet, or when risks change or new approaches emerge. So again, our processes have to be much more flexible. So innovation. A lot of great discussion. I mean, if you're a CTO, when you hear all this stuff, this is like, yeah, this is all good stuff. But it is a contact sport, and I think you've heard a lot about that. It's about the interactions that could create innovation. And I think we have to find ways. And again, it goes back in how are we going to do this, because it's not done in isolation. It's global, it's small business, and we have to figure out this changing role that we're having, because in some cases we're not driving, we're harvesting technologies, and we have to figure out how to adapt them. Some of those things are like nanotechnologies. We hear a lot about it, and there's some of that capability that's really being driven outside of the Department of Defense. And we have to understand that. We have to understand that collectively across the stakeholders as we move these things forward. So expeditionary. And I reflect back and I think, well, as an engineer, what does that really mean to me from a design standpoint? So I said, well, speed matters. I need to be able to deliver combat power quicker. So I talked to a few people and I say, so what does that mean? It means when I hit the ground, I have to be self-sustaining with organic capability for what? Is it 72 hours? Is it 96 hours? And then what does that really mean? So that means I'm not going to get all the fuel coming to me. I better have very fuel-efficient systems. I have to find systems potentially that have a lot of energy storage capability to take care of all of my peripheral equipment that I may have. And my God, maybe I even need exportable power on any of my platforms. What else do I need in 72 hours? I probably need food and water, and thank you to the NS RDAC for bringing in the pizza, so I think we're covered on the food. But we do have technologies that are ready and have been worked as part of FCS, things like water from air. Can we actually generate enough water that we can sustain units for that period of time before the other resources could be moved forward? We always have to be concerned with ammunition and having enough ammunition during that time period. And so how do we make sure, is there other ways to package ammunition so that we can deliver it and have more immediate capabilities? It takes up a lot of space, and there's a lot of issues with that. And then our ability to communicate. I love the fact that we had opportunities to be in meetings with the chief, and he says, you know, I have my iPhone. I can fly anywhere in the world. I can turn that iPhone on, and I can connect. So what do we have to do? Where do we have to go? How do we build those communication suites that allow us to have enough capability and capacity until the larger, again, systems can be brought to bear? So when I look at our operational environment, and I know we operate desert, mountainous terrain, open rolling terrain, urban environments, a lot of discussion about mega cities. What does all this mean in terms of design considerations when you might not have the ability to have a system for every different environment? Our systems have to be tailorable. We hear those words, modular, adaptable to these operational environments, and we have to have the ability for commanders to make the decisions and have flexibility for what they believe is equipment necessary on their systems. I believe we have to look more at commonality and design standards. We have to really think about, and we're going in that direction. I mean, we're moving in that direction on the vehicle, on the vehicle platforms and on the air platforms, but to have common architectures that allow us to plug and play so that as technologies come to bear, for instance, a sensor, you're not redoing an entire system, you're able to actually increase performance. I talk about reliability and maintainability, and now that I'm in the Army Materiel Command, I actually really understand and appreciate what that all means. And I can tell you, maybe we have to start thinking about how we bring in sustainment metrics early. How do we bring in some of those early discussions about sustainment in the design? I talked about this back when I was the director at TARDAC out at one of the tactical wheeled vehicle conferences, and maybe it's not just swap C, maybe it's swap C plus S, or maybe there's a sustainment KPP, but I think that we have to get this because it allows us to put more money back into modernization. And so our approach to getting at reliability, and I think it's pretty serious, the DUSA-TE sponsored an effort between AMSA and ATEC, and they're working real hard at building what they're calling a Center for Reliability Growth, and really trying to understand successful ways to reduce program risk by finding how we can drive down these maintenance and support costs. So that's some of my initial thoughts on where we're going in order to enable the strategic land power for 2025. Look forward to the questions.
And thank you, Doctor, and General Curran.
Well, thank you very much, and I too would like to echo sentiments and thanks to both AUSA, to TRADOC, and to Army Materiel Command for permitting me to participate on this very important panel. What I thought I'd do is give you a little bit of an industry perspective for a few minutes and then look forward to your questions. Next chart, please. For those who are unfamiliar with L3, just a quick snapshot. Large cap aerospace and defense company. We operate primarily in 4 major business sectors or segments. C3ISR, everything from sensors to ISR platforms, and PED and the capabilities to analyze that. Aircraft maintenance and manufacturing, both in the integration side and as well as in the maintenance of a number of different fleets across all the services. Electronic products, scaling from flight simulators to transmissions for armored vehicles to flight data recorders to avionics. And then national security solutions primarily focused in support of intelligence capabilities of the nation and in IT. We are primarily a DoD-focused company, though that is shifting slightly as we've moved from 2011 to 12 and run around 51,000 employees in a number of different countries. So to give you a perspective of where I'm coming from, it is from this kind of organization as we look now and in the future in support of one of our major customers, the United States Army. Next chart, please. So as we look at the current environment in the aerospace and defense markets, I think most industry will agree that this is pretty much what they see. We are driven globally by a physical crisis that is having a destabilizing effect not only on our nation but on the global market. Our own personal government debt, as is the government debt in other nations, but ours is pressuring defense spending, particularly here at home. We're seeing declining defense spending, primarily because of the four aspects you see below. As we come out of Iraq and Afghanistan, those drawdowns, looking for efficiency and affordability initiatives, our decreased OCO budgets that naturally will come as we wind down combat operations. And then, of course, the big stick that's been around, which is now the Budget Control Act and sequestration and the whole aspect and impact that has had on DoD. The results, I think you would agree, as we look forward, less ambitious, perhaps new developmental efforts, more robust, less exquisite, perhaps, solutions, greater focus on rapid response solutions, as we just talked about, and then, of course, industry will continue to look for and turn to international opportunities, but those still remain a challenge for a variety of reasons. So from our perspective, that is kind of the current environment for us in the aerospace and defense market. But there are opportunities. Some might call them challenges, but I think this might be the challenge part. The opportunities, I think, are clear. Next chart. And I just want to mention a few that kind of come to the top of my head. I know that there's many more. We cannot afford in our industry to not laser focus our IRAD efforts on what required capabilities our services need. So we think that our IRAD has to be even more laser focused on warfighter outcomes and capability gaps identified by the service, because we can't afford to spend our IRAD dollars on things you're not going to want to buy. Space, weight, and power solutions, and I put the caveat at an affordable price, I think are going to become a premium. They're going to become a premium if you want an expeditionary, capable force now and into the future. We've got to take a hard look at where can we reduce space, weight, and power in a number of different areas. If you can come in with a capability that is a quarter of the weight or space that we currently do, and it does the same thing, you've got something that someone might be interested in. We've got to pursue technologies, as we've heard, that unburden the soldier. And most of us understand what that means, but I want to add the caveat that unburdening the soldier is also helping the soldier work in a complex environment and not have to spend a lot of time trying to turn his equipment on and turn it off or get it to work for him. It's got to be intuitive. It's got to be something that doesn't add to his rucksack about things he has to learn about. In my view, in the environment we're in, as we look at what we do with our current platforms to adapt them to future requirements, it seems to me that we need to continue to look together for opportunities for bringing equipment in only once instead of multiple times to add capabilities or to reset it to a capability that it exists. I think it's almost criminal to bring in a capability and only reset it to what it used to be if you have the opportunity to bring it to a higher capability, to add swap solutions as an example. And then finally, I think there's great industry opportunities in the live, virtual, and constructive high-fidelity training solutions for our soldiers, particularly if you can bring them in at a lower cost. The pace in which our soldiers, in my view, are going to have to continue to train is you've got to be able to iterate, you've got to be able to iterate quickly, and you're going to have to leverage virtual and constructive even more so based upon the amount of op-tempo dollars you're probably going to have, at least in the near term. Next chart. And final thoughts on Army partnering opportunities, kind of some of them tied to that other chart. I really think technical information exchanges with TRADOC are a great method for expanding information sharing between industry and the Army. The more these kinds of venues are great opportunities to share information and to allow industry to focus on capabilities that you need. So ties, I applaud them. I support continuing to do those, and I support getting information out about what are the capability gaps that you see that industry can help address. Partnering with industry to refine requirements, technical specifications, to work trades, and all in order to make their future capabilities as affordable as possible. I think those are partnering opportunities that we could do more of. Among your operational, technical, and systems architectures, I believe we could partner to do an even better job on the technical architectures of new and improved programs to get at this whole notion of having open architectures to work. The days of being able to build a capability and have it not have to interface with some other capability within the force are gone. It left a long time ago with systems of systems, and frankly, that's where we're going. So your technical architectures have to help you make sure that you're driving towards open systems architectures and that everything will play and interoperate together. And then again, I think looking for opportunities for product improvement of cases and dealing with obsolescence during reset and recap opportunities. Those are just some very off-the-top ideas about partnering and about what some of the opportunities are, and I look forward to your questions.
Okay, thank you, General Curran, and on to General Layfield.
Well, I want to join the panel members in saying thank you to AUSA, thank you to TRADOC, and for allowing me to be here, and a special thanks to General Hicks for allowing me to tee up a topic area to allow some discussion on the opportunities and the challenges ahead of us when we talk about the optimization of human performance. One of the things I've been told ever since I joined the Army, I think we all were, was that what we do is about the human element. It's a human endeavor. It's all about the aspects of the people. We all believe that, and one of the elements that I've come to understand in learning about this field, learning about this emerging optimization of the human element, passion comes to the forefront very quickly. As we develop technologies that actually get applied to the humans and get applied to our units and our people that measure themselves and produce output and help enhance their performance, there's always an underlying passionate theme that I believe is a subset of the training in the future of this domain. So the backdrop that I think General Cone gave was extraordinarily clear. I think it lays out an opportunity and a tectonic shift change, quite frankly, in the fact that perhaps in the past, maybe to take a quote, maybe we have not represented the human factors and the human elements as much as we possibly could have in areas of policy, strategy, and doctrine. and that is a past. It's crystal clear now that that is a shift in the opposite direction, and there's a complete enhancement on the recognition of the importance and the power of the optimization of human performance and the generation of mission effectiveness, combat power, and overall mission success. There's no going back, and I think, like General Cohn said, the generation that we're in now and the future won't let us go back anyway on this. So we've embraced the human element to the highest order, and it reflects itself in our resource allocations, and it reflects itself in the priorities of what we're experimenting about. It's pretty profound. So against that backdrop, I think it's a good segue to have a discussion about the opportunities and the challenges associated with this notion of optimizing the human and carrying it forward to optimizing the smaller unit and the large unit, and actively addressing the effectiveness of higher level decision and higher order decision making. So there are lots of tools out there that we're applying to the human element and to the human dimension right now. They're in play. But there's two really that I'd like to pluck out for a potential discussion that I think are leading the way in many ways, and I think are emerging as profound tools to use to help increase our human performance. And those are this, and the first one I'd like to tee up is this domain of the modeling and the simulation world. It's not new to anybody. We've had simulators for a long, long time. But what is new is, like was discussed this morning and in some of the panels and what we've heard already, is the speed of the evolution of these technologies and the actual capabilities of the suites of modeling and simulation that can be cobbled together to be applied directly to humans for optimizing in rehearsals and performance, and to be applied to groups, small groups and large groups. It's amazing to go to some of the centers of excellence and actually see the realm of the possible that is underway right now. One of the previous slides General Cohn showed at the bottom, it said the tools are here now. They are. The tools are here and they're growing quickly. And in the realm of modeling and simulation, these suites are becoming rehearsal quality more and more every day. They're leveraging all of our technology, all of our databases, and they're pulling together an ability to create an immersive environment for our individuals, for our small groups that we've never had the privilege of experiencing before. And it's amazing. A good example is the evolution and the path it took the Army to get to the dismounted soldier capability. It's an incredible feat. It took a long time to transcend the concept of a jet cockpit simulator and apply it to a squad on the ground, but have the same immersive experience that allows repetition, that allows a rheostat capability to increase the complexity or to tone it down and to zero in on emerging leaders as they perform the exercise. It leads itself towards using technology as a leverage to increase human performance, but now I'd like to tee up the second point that I think is also equally important. And it's not just leveraging technology to help increase or optimize our performance as squad leaders and soldiers and leaders, but frankly, with the world of biometrics and sensing and what's going on now, we're actually blending technology into the human element itself. By having an ability to sense, record, measure, analyze, and then act upon what you see, gives leaders an ability to isolate degraded performance. It gives leaders an ability to isolate performance that's going south for a variety of physical factors that we previously would never have seen. And it gives leaders an opportunity to choose and create and form teams based on what we know how individual performances are being sensed, measured, and acted upon by the human. So to me, the blending of the modeling and simulation world with the sensing world is something that's emerging out there in industry, and I believe it's got a good leap forward on helping us see what the realm of the possible truly is. And there's a lot going on right now, and solutions are there to help us increase decision-making, increase leader confidence, increase optimized units, and to increase the performance of each individual, frankly. With that, I'd like to just tee up a few of the challenges that I've seen in my short time in this industry out there, watching it. Some of the challenges that are really jumping right up to the front about this is the concept of data. There's lots of data being generated when you start to measure human performance. And we already have a large volume of data to sift through, organize, and use and act upon. But when we begin the pursuit of human performance measuring, when we begin optimizing our training regimes based on what we read, we are now gathering more and more data that's going to be easily accessible to the leader again. And so we don't need to needlessly infuse enormous volumes of data just to put in the laps of leaders because we can. It has to be clearly identified as to why we need it and how we go about getting it, and is it really effective, and does it help? The second thing that's popped up so far, in my view, is simplicity. When you start to peel the onion back on what it takes to create an immersive event, it becomes not only data intensive and computing intensive, but it also becomes complex. And we want to allow the small unit leader, we want our brigades and below and our squad leaders, frankly, to have an ability to turn a rheostat on a level of complexity that his unit and his folks are going through without having too much difficulty to go back and change code and change scenario. Driving it to the element of as simple as we can make it available to the end user, our leaders, is something that industry struggles with, from what I've seen. The next one is the sensitivity of the data that gets generated. When we begin to sense biometrics of humans, and we use that data to choose leaders, and we use that data to predict degraded performance, and we blend that data into forming effective and competitive teams and winning teams, that becomes very privileged data. And the ability to secure that data, protect it and store it, and not let it get wildly disseminated is a challenge, and something that's emerged as a challenge. And then the final challenge, frankly, is while there are solutions available today, there needs to be a comprehension of the backdrop of the emerging improvements on these solutions that are happening real time. And so the element of time, and I was very happy to see from an industry perspective that the way General Cohn has laid out the continuum of time to pursue 2025, it really is going to take the time to distill the most effective measures to get at human performance and optimize the behavior and the performance. The translation of the what and the why to industry people who write the code and build the scenarios and create the modeling and sims and create the sensing. The what and the why is an important piece of translation that needs to take place. They're pretty good on the how. They'll sort it out. But a deep comprehension when you get into human element and what's going on up here and why decisions are being made, now you're into creating scenarios and sims and sensors that are going to have a deep underpinning of the what are we after and why are we after it. Otherwise, we could stand the risk of collecting erroneous data or actually abusing the data we collect. I hope that tees up some discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, General Layfield. Mr. Dunn.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, General Hicks, General Cohn, panel. Thank you, everybody, for attending. Before I talk about PacStar, and you can go to the next slide, and our NIE experience as a small business, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about an organization called Gallant Few. I see Buck Curran, General Buck Curran in the audience, and it just reminded me of how important that small organization is. We started out collecting $19,000 in donations, helping Ranger veterans, and our primary mission as a small organization, not-for-profit, is to help those Ranger veterans get jobs and become more active in the workplace. And that small organization, in part thanks to General Curran and others, we've raised over $300,000, and we continue to help Ranger vets find those jobs and become more acclimated with the process, and it's people like the General and others that have contributed. So I encourage you to go to Gallant Few. It's a link, and you'll see all about the organization. The other reason why I'm here is to talk about the NIE and the network integration. It's often called evaluation, exercise, events, efforts. It is an evaluation process that takes a look at new technologies, COTS technologies, and tries to enhance those technologies that are available to the warfighter. And as a small business, investing in NIE and other certification processes like the JITC, and there are other exercises like JUICE, if you can imagine the number that are out there, you have to make a decision on which ones you're going to invest in. And for those of you who are a part of a small business and have dealt with venture capitalists who invest in small companies, they are looking for a return on that investment. And I am responsible for showing that return on investment. But they also care very much about the mission. And they also understand that what we do as a small business helps the end users, helps the warfighter in the field. And if we can focus on that size, weight, and power and create either a modular tactical kit or a cube or a brick and make it as cost-effective as possible, then we've done at least part of our job, and I'm proud to say that our board is very supportive of the effort. PacStar is a small business. We have roughly 52 employees. We're based out of Portland, Oregon. There is a lot of rain in Portland. There's good IPA and Pinot Noir in Portland. But there's also a good group of engineers, very focused and very dedicated on the mission, on tactical comms, and what ended up being modular ties to those advanced technologies in the field. And so as we were making our decision about NIE, we sat around the table and we looked at the analysis, and we knew when you bake in opportunity costs that it was going to be a good, solid $1 million plus investment. But we knew that this is what we do. This is PacStar's day job. And while we did not take the decision to invest lightly, we knew it was the right thing to do for the warfighter in the field. So our initiation to NIE was kind of interesting. The CTO and I made our introduction about PacStar, and it was well organized, well defined. We could make an informed decision as a business. It was broken up into 6 groups evaluating different aspects of the technology. And someone asked, who are these ankle biters that have deployed the 2020 to U.S. Forces Afghanistan, this kit that everyone's using, while we were the little ankle biters and bothering the big guys, at least through the program at the time, the WIN-T program. And so we were evaluating how we could do this in the right manner, through the right process, and do this in a very organized, coordinated fashion. And I'm very proud to say, fast forward to the end result, while nothing was guaranteed, we were not promised deployment. We were promised collaboration, good, solid evaluation, a seat at the planning table, and if we did everything right in working with the engineers and the men and women who ultimately would use, in this case, NIE 13.1, the tactical kits, then the investment would pay off. And ironically, it wasn't the kit that so much impressed the individuals that were evaluating our solutions in this case. It was a nodal manager called IQ Core Software. And so we worked on applications. We collaborated again through a 12 to 15 month process. We received feedback. We worked with CERDEC. We got our reports. In some cases, then they focus on red, yellow, and green. A lot of cases were yellow in some areas that we could improve. We immediately improved. And lo and behold, the end result was a green rating from CERDEC stating that IQ Core Software was going to be the nodal manager or part of the baseline architecture. So if you think about an NIE process, a true certification process that evaluates new technologies and is trying to find baseline components so you do eliminate redundancies and you do improve productivity, then I would tell any small business, especially if the warfighter is your mission and it is what you do as part of your day job, to make the investment. What will happen going forward remains to be seen. We were lucky enough to get a line item in congressional funding. Everyone's familiar with sequestration. Everyone's familiar with the budget process that's taking place, what's coming up in March in appropriations and authorization. And again, nothing is guaranteed. But if we focus on building the foundation and help building the building blocks for that next generation solution, not only can we help the warfighter today, but we can be a part of the modernization effort going forward. It's incumbent upon us to do the best job that we possibly can, but the fact that we have the opportunity to be in the room, having a seat at the planning table, working very hard and collaboratively with our end user partners, there's nothing better. So I am here as an advocate of NIE and appreciate the opportunity. And if you have any questions about the process, especially from a small business perspective, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Dunn. And finally, Dr. Leed.
Thanks very much for the opportunity to be here. I appreciate it. General Hicks asked me to give a few words about the broader context, policy context facing the Army right now, so I'll run through a couple quick thoughts on that. In my mind, the sort of recent policy environment really commenced with the issuing of the Defense Strategic Guidance in 2012. And that guidance really created a conundrum for the Army in that it said that we still need to deter and defeat, but we're not going to structure to do sustained stability operations. To some extent, that was seen as a logical fallacy in the eyes of many in the ground forces, that it's not clear how you are able to deter or potentially defeat in the absence of a serious stability operations capacity and capability, but that was the guidance, and the words have been parsed quite extensively, I think, but the general interpretation has been for the Army be a full spectrum force at a much smaller size, and it's definitely playing out that way. So how does that compare to some of the broader trends going on in the world? I think there's great discussion of this yesterday, been more of that today. Some of those trends, the increasing need to shore up some of our older international institutions and our traditional partners while preparing to work with a disparate set of new ones, the decentralization or the atomization of power, the ever-falling barriers to entry for powerful military relevant capabilities, strains on regional stability that are coming from any number of sources, increased resource competition, climate change, the growing accrual of wealth to the owners of capital as opposed to labor, and the implications of that for governance. So the policy response to that set of challenges has been to argue for primarily naval and air capabilities. The Army, of course, has countered that that's a fairly ahistorical approach, but that argument has sort of fallen on deaf ears to a large extent. So ultimately, that's left the Army leadership in a position of trying to prepare the Army for a volatile and highly uncertain future with little support from the broader policy community. So that's a pretty dire challenge, but in my mind, I think there's both a little bit of good news and a little bit of bad in it. The bad news, obviously, is that it's one that's very consistent with large cuts in end strength, which we're seeing take place. And then the good news, in my mind, is that it's much less clear that there's any appetite or ability, at least in the executive branch, for driving what the Army does within overall end strength and budgetary guidance. I think there's a pretty light hand in that regard. So what that ultimately means is that the Army's response to the circumstances is really critical, and it's largely in its own hands. So what should the Army do? Here, too, I think the Army's at a little bit of a disadvantage because policymakers are really looking for creativity and new thinking when much of the Army's thinking is based not just on the last 10 to 12 years, but sort of on the history of civilization as far back as we can reliably trace it. So some observers sometimes characterize that as conservatism, and it might be that, but it could well be an appropriate response given the history of conflict. But nevertheless, I think people are looking for the Army to take some bold moves and as a demonstration that it fully understands institutionally the desire to make changes and adapt to the new world. So there are lots of different opportunities and efforts that would align with that desire, but I would argue that none have quite reached the threshold of Army observers or people watching the Army saying, wow, this really reflects some of that new thinking and bold ideas. I would say that desire, I find, when it's expressed by people outside the Army, when you press them on what kinds of new kinds of things would they want to see and what would, therefore, should the Army stop doing in order to do those very new things, they pretty much like a lot of what the Army does. So they really like the ability to fight and win. They really like the partner capacity. They want them to be regionally aligned. So it's very hard to get those same policy makers to express what different but still good would look like. That said, what do I think some of the potential areas are that could get to that kind of wow factor? Certainly, I think in the area of urbanization, which has been brought up a couple of times, or numerous times, I think the question for the Army in this area will be, as we look at megacities, if the answer is we're essentially going to keep the same organizations and the same basic formations with the same kinds of capabilities, but maybe put a new set of sensors on them or something, that's not going to satisfy the expectations. Again, I think there's an implicit expectation in a hard look at megacities that you would have to come up with something fairly different than what we've got. And again, not necessarily that would be the complete force, but that there would be some profound implications of that. Vertical lift has also come up a number of times. I think it's certainly, I know General Hicks has spent a lot of his time looking at the huge gains in capability that you would see from an ultra-heavy lift capability that's a little further on down the line. But I don't think there's been enough exploration and explanation of the potential transformational, and transformation may be too strong, but very significant operational gains that could be realized from the joint multi-role and suite of versions that are closer in and within the near-term time horizon. Great discussion this morning about cyber. In my mind, I think there's still room for the Army to do more in making it more directly relevant to smaller units and at lower echelons. I think it's not just an issue of what's on the network, but also sort of anything with a processor, whether it's tied to the network or not, and what does that really mean for how small units conduct operations. And we at CSIS have done some work on this and gotten some pretty high-level legal folks to say, yeah, it's hard to get the authorities, but what's in an XORD is in an XORD, so you could go through the process where ultimately you can get to, where you don't have to create new ones to get to that kind of capability. So again, I think there's room for doing some harder thinking about that. Not really an S&T issue, but context for the application of it. In the training arena, obviously huge amounts of capability there, and it's progressing very rapidly. In my mind, I think there needs to be more of an explicit articulation by Army leaders about how they want that capability to be used, how the echelons of training responsibilities may be shifting, and what training looks like 15, 20 years from now. Is it the same, or is it different in any significant way? And then finally, again, not an S&T issue per se, but I would argue that the Army, for both political and practical reasons, needs to start opening the door to examining different models for how the active reserve and guard are going to interact and operate together going forward. Obviously, it's a politically fraught area, but necessary for a variety of different reasons. I think there's room both for looking at how do you leverage S&T to mitigate some of the risks associated with with the different compos and their respective strengths. So that's one area. And then I also think thinking harder about common S&T programs that could be worked collaboratively between the compos may not be substantially different between them, but could help enhance the relationship in a way that's useful to all. So I think there's an opportunity there as well. In my mind, a huge asset here now is what General Cohn talked about earlier, the Force 2025 maneuvers, the opportunity to really very deliberately and broadly experiment is key to this future and to the set of challenges that the Army's facing. The opportunity to look at alternative force designs for informing what can be a very politically and emotionally driven discussion about capital labor trades with data would be extremely useful, I think. And then also the imperative to include as much soft science as hard in that environment. So really ensuring that we're bringing things like decision science and some of the other social science advances to bear in that context, I think is really crucial. I'll close with, I read a great quote yesterday about how we're in an era of Stone Age emotions, medieval institutions, and Star Wars technology. And so in my mind, I think the real challenge is how do you best leverage that Star Wars technology in that broader context. And so I think the Army's got a lot of great things going on in that regard, and remains to be seen how it'll play out.
Well, I thank the panel for their fulsome responses. I think by my watch we have 33 seconds left. General Swan, may I go 5 minutes? Thank you. All right. For General Hicks, I'd ask panel members to be concise. What is the biggest technical barrier to being ready for expeditionary maneuver?
There are two areas. One of them is human and the other is physical. The first one is mindset. We have some units in the Army that make their lifeblood, it's in their DNA to be expeditionary. We have to further inculcate that across the force. The way that we're handling the Global Response Force that General Cohn noted in his presentation is part of that, where we've extended ready companies and other components to support the brigade, the division ready force, the brigade at Fort Bragg, across the Army rather than keeping it inside the 18th Airborne Corps family. So that the beginnings of that, and we're making a number of other challenges, changes, some of which we're just relearning old lessons and going back and looking at our post camps and stations as deployment platforms and that sort of thing. The other one is physical, and I spoke at an expeditionary conference with the Navy and Marine Corps recently. I elbowed my way in with Mick Nicholson as my partner, and there was a lot of pushback about the Army being expeditionary, and I said, well, first, you can't fight without us being there, because you can't sustain yourself, any of you. And the second thing is that we have a long history of being expeditionary with 22 major amphib ops and 16 airborne operations since World War II in our history, so let's keep that in mind. But the thing that makes it difficult to bring that operationally significant force, the thing that's going to physically change facts on the ground, is demand. It's not the tooth. The brigade, our current coin of the realm in terms of operations, is not that hard to deploy. It's bringing all the rest of the stuff that allows it to continue to sustain operations, that enduring capability that I talked about, and frankly to sustain and enable the rest of the joint force, and particularly our brothers in the Marine Corps. That's the challenge. And so in terms of science and technology, and Grace touched on this a little bit, we've really got to look at how do we reduce the consumption of the combat formation so that we're able to make smart changes and reductions, not only in that formation, but in the support structure that follows it and enables it to do its business.
Great, thank you. To Dr. Leed, what is the thing that Congress needs to do that would most help the Army speed new technologies into the hands of soldiers?
In my mind, there's been some discussion earlier about having JIDO-like capabilities, and I have a rather reductionist view of the key critical enabler of JIDO, in my mind, was colorless money. And that's just a huge asset that can't be replicated any other way. So I would say greater pots of colorless money. I think the likelihood's pretty dim, but but that would be it.
Money always works. To Dr. Bochenek and General Layfield, whoever feels most qualified, does the Brigade Modernization Command at Fort Bliss, Texas, have a role in achieving the agility and innovation required for this new improved R&D process?
Clearly it does. It's already enhancing the ability to see that and to allow an opportunity and the infrastructure to get after the modernization experiments. However, I do think that the concept that was briefed this morning about the distributed places where this takes place, at the battle labs, the CTCs, Fort Bliss, and other places, to allow other size units and less mature units to materialize as well, and equally important. So I think the answer is yes, and the expanded view.
And if I could just jump on that, I mean, I talked about, innovation is a contact sport, and the value of the engineer having that dialogue with the users is, you can't even understand unless you're able to be in that real-time window with the user community. So it has tremendous value, and I do agree that we have to look at more opportunities and not less.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I think the time is up, and we certainly appreciate you listening to us.